wanted to introduce myself with a song and open that way, because it always just opens the space, and it does something special as opposed to just standing up. And I really appreciate the introduction that you gave for me, and thank you all for welcoming me here today, and my husband who will be joining us shortly. It was interesting because I heard different stories about how this opportunity came together for faculty, and that you've had different speakers that have come, and as I was preparing for this time, it was really my whole life that kind of came back to me and kind of showing me where I've come from and where I am now at this stage in my life, and the way that things happen to you in your life that are really, sometimes they seem like spontaneous actions, but they're actually always, I think, meant to be. That there's really no coincidences as far as I can tell, with my life when I look back. And the song that I opened with it's a morning song, morning time song from the Lummi language, which is the tribe that I'm enrolled in Washington here. And then I also come from Clallam. And the song, it talks about the teachings that we have as Native people, and throughout my travels in Central and South America and in different parts of the world, over in Europe and Asia, every time I've met indigenous people from different places, they talk about the teaching that, there's the sun that comes up in the east direction, and that we have that opportunity every morning to get up and present ourselves to the east direction, and that there's spirits that come over the land at that time with the sun, and that they look for people who are up, and they're involved in in creating their life together with the Creator, and that there's times that they'll respond to you. That's a time in the morning that they'll listen to you, and they'll work with you on the things that you're asking for in your life, or maybe you have a person that you want to pray for in your family, somebody who might be sick, or just certain pathways that you'd like to see open for yourself. And so that song is one that I created with just with some of my elders and the teachings I've seen, both from my family at Lummi and Clallam, and then also with indigenous peoples in different parts of the world, that we all share that knowledge that this is a very sacred time. And I remember meeting people in Mexico who told me, the sun, it comes up every day for us, because if you really think about it, there's millions of people on this earth who pray for that sunrise time. And from all different cultures, there's a lot of people on this earth who honor that time in the morning and look at each day that we have as a gift, and that it's something special that we don't take for granted. And I think the older we get in our lives, and as we go through life being human with our family members, or maybe we've lost loved ones, we see just how precious this life is, and that we can try and live it to its fullest every day. And so that song is one that I wanted to create in order to remember that teaching and to have it live on, through that song. And so that was the song I opened with this morning. And I have different roots that I come from. On my father's side, my late father was ChenoaEgawa, and he was Lummi and Clallam, and then that was on his mother's side, and then on his father's side he was Hawaiian and Japanese. And so I wanted to just give a little bit of background about my lineage and where I come from, and his parents on his grandparents on the Lummi and Clallam side lived over at Jamestown, Clallam. And they really had a home there on the ocean and on the water, and my great-grandmother is the one who told me about this time. And so it was my great-great-grandma and my great-great-grandpa, and then my great-grandma was a little girl when they still lived there. And they said that it was at that time, the great-grandma was born in 1886, and so it was kind of around the time that the reservations were being formed throughout the state. And they had an auntie who lived up at Lummi, where they were establishing the Lummi Reservation, and I guess she had lived back in the woods by herself. And so she called upon the family from Clallam and asked if they would mind moving, because she was alone there and she didn't feel comfortable being there by herself. And so even though my great-great-grandma, who I'll call Granny, because that's what everybody called her, Granny was a little hesitant because she grew up at Jamestown and loved that land and the water, and would miss that terribly later on, but they went, the whole family went. And it was a small family, which was kind of unusual at that time too. It was just my great-grandma, and she had one brother. And so they packed up their family canoe, and then they moved up to Lummi, and they stayed there with the auntie, and they lived in a house in the back, in the woods back on the land at Lummi. And my great-grandma told us, you know, when we would go visit her, and she would say, this place that we lived at, we would go see it too. Now it's back in the woods, and so there's still some remains of the house. But there was a pond back there, and we have the swans over on the western side of the mountains that migrate. Every time in the winter they come through, and they go into the Skagit Valley area there. And there were 2 swans that would come, and they would stay at the house where the family lived. And they would stay there for a couple weeks or more each year, and then they would move on again. But each year they would come back and stay there. And my great-grandma said her and her brother used to play back there a lot. And she said that one day her father told her, you guys, you know, you need to stay away from that area for a while. You know, play in a different place, but, you know, leave that pond alone. And those swans had come back again. And my grandma told me that she woke up early one morning, and she said she heard this song that was being sung, and the swans, they had been there for a while, and they were communicating with her father, and they were telling her father, we're not going to be returning again, this is our last visit here. And these are our names are Sololitsa and Solailitsa, and we're going to give you this song. And so they sang this song, and my grandma said that they circled over the house, and they were singing this song, and it's a song that became our family song, and it was one that, you know, in our Lummi tribe we don't have like clan systems, but the family now, they say that we're part of that clan, the Lummi, the Swan clan, and with this song it's traveled from the end of the 1800s up until now, and so I wanted to share that with you, that song also. And my grandma told us that it became one of my grandpa's smokehouse songs. So we have our smokehouse ways over on the west coast, and people will go into the mountains and they'll fast in the wintertime, and they'll stay in the smokehouse and fast. And they receive songs out there. They receive songs from the mountains, from the rivers, from the forests, and so it was that way for him. He carried that song with him. And then they said he went out in our traditional way and fasted as well. And they said that he wanted to become the greatest gambler of all time. And that was the bone game. So I was really laughing when I heard that, and I thought that was just the greatest thing. But it was, you know, there's a kind of concentration that we develop through the bone games, and that it's a kind of concentration that you see kind of leaving the world today, because our younger generations are caught up in the technological world, and everything's moving so fast that you see a lot of people having a hard time focusing and concentrating. But in the bone game, you know, it would be the person who would have a power that they could work with the mind of the people on the opposing side and change their mind, or, you know, or trick them through the way that they could hold their focus and their concentration. And so it was a really neat thing for my grandfather to have that goal. You know, it meant so much more than it just sounds. You know, to become the greatest gambler in the world, it's really about mastering your own abilities and your own capabilities that we have. And so they said that he would use the Swan song, and then his own power song he would put at the end of the Swan song, and that was what he used in Smokehouse. But I'll just share our family song with you. So that's where my father's mother came from, and on my grandfather's side, on my dad's side, he was Japanese and Hawaiian. And I just wanted to share just a little bit about his story as well, because it was a very interesting one. And he grew up in Maui. He was born in Maui in the Hawaiian Islands. And at that time, the town of Lahaina was a small whaling village. And now, if any of you have gone to Hawaii on vacation, you'll see that it's a huge resort, and there's all kinds of condos and hotels. And, but at that time, when he grew up, it was still just a small whaling village. And he said that it was when he was a young boy, his mother had passed away, and the father gave away a lot of his siblings to different relatives. And my grandpa was given to an uncle who really didn't treat him very well. And he had a son of his own already, and he said, my grandpa said he felt like he was kind of treated like a servant and not really loved and cared for. And it actually caused him to want to run away. And at that time, the sugarcane ships would load up out in the harbor. And my grandfather stowed away on one of the sugarcane boats that were going to San Francisco. And he arrived in San Francisco, and the people on the crew thought that he had fallen asleep on the job when he was loading sugarcane, and so they were going to send him back. You know, they said, "Oh no, don't worry, we'll send you back when we set sail again." And so, but my grandpa didn't have that plan. He had another relative there in San Francisco, and he decided that he would stay with this relative, and he began working at a young age and selling newspapers. And so he would go out and just be one of those young kids who would be selling papers on the street corner. And then at the end of the day, he would take his money and he would go back to his boss and turn in the money, and there should be the equal amount of papers that had been sold. But one day he was, somebody came up and they robbed him at the end of the day. And I think, you know, he was telling us, as he was telling us this story, he really didn't say that he was angry, but I think back on kind of what he had been through in his life, and probably how he felt as a child who had to run away and didn't feel like he received that love from the uncle, and having the mom have a mother who passed away when you were a small child. I think that he probably had a lot of feelings inside of him that he didn't know what to do with. And he said he would go over to this one boxing gym, and he would watch all the boxers train, and the guy who owned the gym always noticed him, and so he asked him one day if he wanted to train, and this owner of the gym actually trained my grandpa, and he became a lightweight professional boxer and traveled up the coast where he met my Lummi and Clallam grandmother, who was working in Seattle at the time. So that story of the family on that side is just kind of, you know, someday, you know, as I was telling you guys, I was just thinking about all these stories in our family, and then the stories, our native stories and our origin stories, and someday maybe write a book or something. But on my mom's side, I'm Norwegian and Swedish. That was her father. And then on her mother's side, we were Scottish and English, and we were also Irish, but that grandma didn't like to mention the Irish side. So they had their own battle, but we always say, well, that's good, it's good, Grandma, we're Scottish, English, Irish, we'll remember that part for you. So I remember just as a kid growing up, it was a little confusing being that mixed. And I remember our parents always would involve us in all the different ethnicities that we were. They would try and make sure that we had part of that in our growing up. But I always kind of remember that I felt like I was just a little different, and I didn't fit in, and I didn't look like anybody. You know, that I didn't look Japanese, all Japanese. I didn't look all Lummi. I didn't look all Hawaiian. I certainly didn't look all Norwegian and Swedish. But it was kind of neat one day, because I was traveling in Mexico. This was as an adult, and we had an exchange during the time when they were doing the World Population Conference in Cairo, Egypt, and they had a conference of poets and writers and native people that drafted a declaration on population, and they wanted to submit it at the World Conference. And so there was a writer from South Africa there, and they asked me, well, what's your ethnicity? And I said, I'm Lummi and Sklallam, Hawaiian, Japanese, Norwegian, Swedish, English, Irish, Scottish. I said, I'm just all mixed up. And that man, he just said to me, he said, you know, you don't ever need to say that again. You know, he said, you have a power from every lineage, and every lineage has its own gifts. And so, you know, feel good about that because you carry the strength of all these bloodlines, and so that's a benefit, and you never need to say that again. Don't. And so it was just one of those things that the way that we define ourselves and the way that we say I'm all mixed up, and how that kind of plays out in your life if you start believing it yourself. And so it was kind of one of those moments that was kind of made me feel like, okay, good, I can carry all of these and feel good about that. And just as every culture on this earth has a gift, every individual on this earth has a gift, and every person that's born onto this earth has something special that when they can contribute that and when they can express it fully, the world is going to be a better place because we can all enjoy the wealth that every individual carries. And there are some stories of different cultures around the earth, and one of them that I always really like, and maybe some of you have used this book in your class, I don't know, but I came across this story called Of Water and the Spirit, and it's Dagara tribe in Burkina Faso, Africa. And the way they have it in their community is that when a woman is pregnant, when she's carrying that life, she'll go to the medicine people, and they'll have a conversation with the spirit of the child that she's carrying, and they will and the woman, the mother, will serve as a spiritual medium, so she will be the voice of that child. And then the elders will ask, you know, who are you, and where are you coming from, and what is it that you need to remember here on this earth in order to carry out your purpose. And so during that conversation, they'll take key things that they need in order to help that little child coming into the world to remember. And they say in their culture that when we're born onto this earth, we pass by the tree of forgetting, and that we have to forget everything that we know in the spirit world in order to play out our lives here on the earth. And so I just thought that was really amazing, you know, because as I go through my own life, I see that that's true. There's sometimes I get glimpses of, oh, I know more than who I am as Chenoa. I know some things, other things, and you don't get to see that all the time. But as you go through your life, you realize that there's more there than we sometimes recognize. And so they say in the Dagara tribe that for a community to be really strong, that you need to support the children that way, and that you need to recognize their gifts, and then you need to help them to hone those gifts and to express them for the benefit of everyone. And then here in our own coastal tribes, we have another teaching that says don't teach everyone the same thing, because if everyone knows the same thing, then we won't need each other. And so you know, I think about that a lot, and I think when I was down in Guatemala as well, I heard another thing that related to that, and that was from some of the Mayan midwives. And they told me that, you know, before the educational system came, the girls in the community were recognized for carrying that gift as small children, and then they were mentored by the midwives, and then they would come into that naturally. And they were saying now things are changing, and anyone who wants to be a midwife could be a midwife, but it doesn't necessarily mean you have that gift. You might study it up here, but do you have it here in your heart? And so I'm bringing all these things up because I think that I've been a person in my life too who's had to really look at, you know, what is my gift. And I remember when I was a child, I was an artist, and then I remember I used to sing, but it was more like to popular songs on the radio, and and it was later in my life that I came into our ceremonies. And it was in our ceremonies, even though I went through college because in our family it was expected you would go on, and even if you didn't know what you were going to do, you would go on to college. So I took that step out of high school and went right into university, and didn't really know what I wanted. I did know what I wanted. I was an artist, and I was going to go to art school. And my father was an artist, and he said, "Don't go to art school. You'll never make any money as an artist." And and so I ended up changing it. And we had traveled a lot when we were children. We lived in Germany for 5 years, and that was a job my father took when we were all, I have a brother and a sister, and we were all little, and we lived in Germany for 5 years, and he ran a big art center on one of the military bases. He wasn't in the army, but he ran a big art center. And so we grew up making a lot of things, but when I was back at that point in college, then he said, okay, well, you know, go to business school. And we had traveled a lot in Germany. We traveled throughout Western Europe, and I loved traveling, and I loved all the different languages that there are on this earth. And so I said, okay, business, but I'll make it international business. And I had like a minor in Spanish and a minor in art, and you know, all these little minors. And then I put it together into international business in Spanish. And as I was saying earlier, you know, there's really no coincidences, you know, so I had to see that path and see the way of the world from the perspective of dominant society and the things that are important. But from a native perspective, when I went into our ceremonies, I could see a depth of understanding that supersedes anything I've ever seen in the technological world. And it's about the way that this world is, and the things that are important on this earth, the elements that give us life, the earth that gives us life, the spirit that exists in all things. And so I learned through our ceremonies to have a voice, and which was really interesting, because I can remember in college going to speech classes and just being a nervous wreck and not being able to get up in front of anyone, and I would just get up there and my voice would just be like that, and I couldn't even utter a word. And so, but then when I went into our ceremonies, a lot of our ceremonies are this way from different tribes. There's points during the ceremony where you might be asked, you might be called upon, and you might be asked to express yourself and share something with everyone, you know. And I can remember when that started happening to me, I would go into that kind of that fear mode too, where I would be like, well, what am I going to share with all these people? What do I have to say that's important? And I would get that nervous feeling. But as I kept coming back, and as I would hear our songs and love our drums and start learning those songs, then I started finding my voice, and I found that the nervousness and the fear, the adrenaline of that emotion and that feeling is pretty much can be your power or your fear. And so when you channel that fear and you use it in a way where I guess it's like you feel, it's like a feeling. It's like it starts moving, the energy starts moving, and then you can either go into fear or you can have something to say. But I found that fear was that it was really an energy that wanted to say something. And so I started learning those songs, and I was going to college at the same time, so I had this dual life going. You know, I would go and work in the city, and a lot of our ceremonies were out somewhere out of town, and I can remember coming home from the ceremonies, and I'd be driving back into town, and I'd be listening to our songs, and I would get really sad, because I could just kind of feel the difference in the worlds, the city life, and what I just came from, which is just much more in a natural flow, and you listen and you feel, and it comes from here. And then having to come over to the other world where it's just go, 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 and you just are busy, and sometimes you get running so fast and so hard that you don't even remember where it was you were trying to go. And so it's kind of been that sort of thing that I recognized, you know, just time to slow down a little bit and look at this point in my life, you know. And I go back to our ceremonies, and I keep getting, you know, your gift is to share your songs, and your gift is your spirit. So whatever else you want to build around yourself, and however else busy you want to be, you can do that. You can do that. But don't forget what your gift is. And so I share those stories about that. You know, when every one of us finds that special gift that we carry, and we share it with the world, then I feel like that's where you do what you're supposed to do here, and everybody can benefit from that. There's a story that I wanted to share about the first songs, and from one culture, and this is from the Quileute tribe. tribe. And they say a long time ago on what's known as the Olympic Peninsula today, there was an old man who was the last head whale hunter in his village. And in his old age, and in his wife's old age, she gave birth to their first child. And this child was the only one who could carry on the whaling skills of the old man. And so the parents were so happy when this little boy was born. And as he grew, the father was just kind of anxiously waiting for that point in time where he'd be old enough that he could take him out and begin teaching him all of the wisdom that he had around the whale hunt. And it was around the time when this little boy was 12 years old, and the father decided that this was the time. And he went and he talked with some of the other people in the village, and he said, it's time for me to teach my son. I'm going to take him out, and I'm going to start instructing him in this way. And the people in the village said, you should wait a little while longer. He's really young still, and it's dangerous. It's a dangerous thing to be doing, to take him out on a whale hunt. Wait for a little while. But the father felt his own sense of urgency because he was getting on in his years, and he thought, no, I need to start now. And so he rounded up his crew early that next morning, and he brought his little boy, and they went out in the canoe, and they went out and they searched for that first whale of that day. And they spotted that whale out there, and the crew pulled up alongside the back of that whale. And the father was standing in the front of the canoe, and he had his son by his side. And he had that harpoon, and on the end of the harpoon he had his rope that was attached to it. And when they pulled that canoe up alongside the back of that whale, the father let go that harpoon into the back of the whale. And that rope played out. That whale, it dove deep when it got hit. And the rope, the coils from it, grabbed the ankle of that little boy, and it pulled him overboard. And the crew just panicked, and the father, of course, was just in a state of panic. And they searched for him, and they searched for him for quite some time. And the father was thinking to himself, why didn't I listen to the people? They told me to wait. This is dangerous. Now look what I've done. My son's life is in danger. I don't know if we're going to find him. And he was thinking all these thoughts when the little boy surfaced. And he surfaced, but he was unconscious. He was still alive. And they pulled him back into the canoe, and they went back to shore as quickly as they could, and they brought him into, his parents stayed by his side, and the people of the village stayed by his side, and they prayed for him, they sang for him. And they said that it was 4 days and 4 nights that little boy lay unconscious, and it was the morning of the 5th day that he awoke. And he said, I want to tell you what happened to me when I was down under the water with that whale. He said, the whale spoke to me, and he said, come down, pull yourself down the rope, come toward my blowhole, get close to me. And so the little boy did that. He pulled himself down underwater toward the blowhole of that whale, and when he got close to the back of the whale, that whale released a huge air bubble that surrounded the little boy. And within that bubble, he could breathe. And then that whale began to bring that little boy back up to the surface, and he went through layers, and that little boy said there were layers there in the ocean, and he said every layer had its own color, and every layer had its own song. And he said that whale, he just kept taking me up, and every layer we went through was a more beautiful color, and every layer was a more beautiful song until I came to the surface, and that's when I fell asleep. And they said that those colors of the world came through that whale, and that whale gifted them to the boy. And then all these different songs that he gifted them were gifted to the people as well. And so it was through that experience that little boy, some months later, gathered up his own crew, and he took them out on their very first whale hunt. And they brought back the biggest whale that the village had ever seen. So that's a story of this, some of the origin of the colors of this earth, and then where some of our songs come from. And the way I was saying it, they come from nature, and we still recognize that. We still have people, fishermen, who go out and they say, you can go out to certain areas and you're going to hear a song out there, and you'll sing it while you're out there, and then maybe sometime you'll come back home and you'll forget that song. But then you find yourself going back out to that fishing area again, and you hear that song again, and you recognize that song lives over there. That song comes from that part of nature. And so I just wanted to share that story with you too, and in thinking about how these songs come about. so it was, so through the ceremonies that we have, you know, I just began kind of living this dualistic lifestyle and looking at how do you make that work? How do you bring these things together so that you can, as a Native person who can live in this dominant society, but also lives really much in your own culture and the culture of indigenous peoples of this earth, how do you blend that and make it work? And it's a pretty tough thing to do sometimes. And I guess I found lately that it's just about trying to trust yourself to live your truth, and that your spirit does know some things, and so there's times where you can fall back on that wisdom and not have to have it all figured out, but if you can live from a place where you can trust yourself and at least see, you know, what lies ahead for you when you do that, that it might be something that the spirits would really gift you for being courageous enough to follow your heart. And so I just wanted to, let's see, I had some other songs I wanted to share with you, because at that time that I was trying to figure out whether I was really a singer or not, I learned probably the ceremonial songs first, and then those brought me to the family songs that we have at Lummi and Sklallam. And so my dad had actually, I always say my dad knew a lot of things, and I saw that, you know, when we went through his passing, and then just thinking back about some of the things he'd given me while he was here, and he understood, you know, that I had this, that I was a singer, and that our ceremonies and our spirituality and our culture was important to me. He would give me these certain gifts that I knew he knew that. And so he gave me this drum, and I probably had it for 4 years before I ever sang on it or anything. And I used to learn our family songs, and then I was thinking one day, I said, I wonder if my own songs would come to me. I wonder if I can receive songs. And I'm going to give my drum a little water because it's drier over here in Yakima. Toppenish. I remember one time we went down, Alex and I went down to Arizona, and we visited one of the schools over there, and I brought this little drum with me, and it's so dry down there, and I took my drum out and I started playing, and it was like ding, 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 ding. It's like, oh, I need some water. But this day I was sitting there, I was in my house, and I had my drum, and I was just singing all the family songs that I'd learned, and I started playing this song at the end of that. It was almost like those family songs opened the doorway for those other songs. That's how it felt. And this song came to me, so I wanted to share that with you guys. This was the first song, and when I talk to kids, I tell them that, you know, because when we look back on our lives as adults, we remember maybe that those things that we did for the first time were really scary. And then once you find that you can do that, I remember my first job waiting tables was scary. So I always tell them that, you know, going up and talking to people and asking what they want, and do you need more water? And then that used to scare me a lot. And then I tell the kids, you know, I say after you find that is, you can do that. You know, everything you do and everything you learn in your life that's new, you gain confidence because you realize, okay, I can do that. I can do that. Now I can challenge my fear the next time, and I can go step into that unknown territory and see how I do. And if I can learn that thing, then I'm going to feel stronger in myself in this world. And so I was telling them, you know, that's how I felt with the songs. And I said, I don't know. I didn't know if I was a singer, and I told one of my friends. He said, well, you're a singer. And I said, well, I sing, but I don't think I'm a singer. And he said, no, just say you're a singer and see what happens. So that was a few years ago. And he was right. So this is the first song that came to me. I'll share that with you. So after that, then I was happy. I said, okay, I can do this too. And those songs, you know, they came, and the drum, you know, just the heartbeat of the drum, and all of our drums, you know, that we have. I say as Native people, but then as every culture on the earth. You know, I always mention that too. You know, that every culture on the earth in the beginning had a drum, and a lot of the cultures on this earth still do. And this drum, it connects us to the heartbeat of our own selves, and the heartbeat recognizing our humanity, and recognizing the heartbeat of the Mother Earth that gives us life. And that as when we're still in the womb, that heartbeat of our mother is the first sound that we hear, and it's that warmth and that spirit of her that we all can relate to. So when we hear that drum, it's that memory of when you're in the womb and everything is warm and you're protected and you're taken care of, and you hear your mother's heartbeat. And so we have all of our different styles of drums. You know, this hand drum here is what we use a lot on the coastal side. And then I think over here in Yakima, there's a lot of hand drums as well, bigger ones as well. And then there's the powwow drums, and I brought my husband with me today because we have the little water drum with us that he tied up in the other room, and I wanted to share some of the stories that go along with the drums and the water drum, and have him share one story of the drums, and then tell you a story about this little water drum. And then we wanted to share some songs from the water drum with you, and those were the ones that I was talking about that inspired me to learn my own family songs, and to go deeper into our spiritual path.